Creating a setting with cities, provinces, and states, as well as people to populate all of these areas, bringing these settings to life can be quite a challenge for any gaming group or GM. So creating an entire world for your players can feel like an impossible task. However, with a few simple tools, you can create rich, in-depth worlds on the fly. Entire planets are created exactly the same way as cities, one step at a time. Today's video was made possible by my patrons. This is the video topic that was voted on for May. If you would like to get a say in what I produce next, as well as get access to some homebrew content for the games that I cover, please consider joining me over on Patreon. We begin, as we always do, at step 1, and it's here we're going to decide exactly what type of world we're going to build. What do you need? What do you want it to be? If you're using this on the fly, the Galaxy Exploration Manual has some tables you can roll to help get your creative juices going. What is the astrological body going to be? Is it a planet? Is it a space station, satellite? Is it an asteroid? If it's a planet, is it going to be a habitable planet? Is it going to be just a barren, lifeless rock? And although in space, for real, most planets are just barren rocks, that doesn't make for a great sci-fi setting all the time. And if we look at page 46 of the Galaxy Exploration Manual, you will find some useful tables here. Using a percentile dice, you can randomize what planet your players are finding, or if you want to create an entire world for them to play in, then you just make a choice, you just pick. All in all, step 1 is very, very simple. Now, step 2 that we need to address for these planets and things that we need to think about: what type of gravity do we have on the planet? What type of atmosphere is there? Is the air toxic and poisonous, or is it completely normal, breathable, and fine? And if you're going with the barren rock route, then of course you're going to have no atmosphere. If you do have atmosphere and the air is breathable, what type of air is it? Is it thin? Is it laden with oxygen? GMs, you can have a little bit of fun with this one. For example, if your players are in a thin air environment where there's not a lot of oxygen, maybe everybody on the planet gets a -2 to skill checks that require athletics or strength. You don't have to do this modifier, but it's just something fun to think about. On the flip side of that, if it's a oxygen-rich environment, maybe it's harder for them to get drunk. Maybe they gain +2 on their athletics or strength-based skills. Now you can choose to obviously do nothing with this, not apply any penalties or bonuses to the atmosphere, but feel free to have as much fun as you want with these world-building tools. Gravity is an important part of planet building as well. Playing around in environments that have 0 or low gravity can be a lot of fun. If you plan on using no gravity, I would maybe suggest doing this on a space station rather than an entire planet, but who am I to say what your fun is? Now, if the world that you're creating has low gravity or even no gravity, you have to think a little bit about the society that would live there. What would their buildings look like? What would day-to-day life look like for someone who hasn't needed to worry about mass? We don't have to solve the society problem just yet, but keep that in the back of your mind. Moving on to step 3 before we get too far ahead of ourselves, this is where we discuss what kind of planet this is. What is its biome? What does the environment look like? Now, depending on how close to the sun or far away from the sun you are, can change the type of environment on the planet. But this is also science fantasy, so throw your conventional rules out the window. Now, there's one tip that I would give you for creating entire worlds. Try to stick to 1 biome, maybe 2 at max. This is going to be just a little bit easier on you as the GM or as the creator of the world. In reality, planets usually have several biomes. But for writing and world building, when you're dealing with science fantasy, it's much easier and a little bit more consistent to have just one environment that you need to worry about. One example of this would be, consider the game Mass Effect. When you went exploring on a planet, I mean, you only really saw a small chunk of the planet, but it was one environment. On the flip side to this, if the planet that you're building is going to be the one and only location that your players are visiting, then yes, you absolutely should diversify the biomes, diversify the environments. There should be a lot of them. But when you're playing with a game that puts a focus on exploration and exploring planets, I wouldn't necessarily limit my group to just one planet. Now, step 4 is where we actually start to bring life to the planet. When you're breathing life into a planet, when you are putting civilization and societies and people on your planet, there is 5 key things that we need to think about. The Galaxy Exploration Manual lists them out as accord, alignment, magic level, technology, and religion. Not necessarily in that order. I like to change the name of the 2 as I feel like this idea better represents society as a whole. And when you're creating a society, the first thing that I would think about is called harmony. How well does a civilization get along? How are the politics? Is there any conflict between political groups? Are they all unified in their thinking, progressing towards one singular goal, advancing the society or something else? Societies on the high end of this tend to be a little bit more utopian. And if you're on the low end, well, then you're looking more like Mad Max. Another thing to think about are societal temperaments. What are their hot button issues? Are they quick to anger? Are they a generally tolerant species? You have to paint in broad strokes to get the picture complete, but you don't have to make it 100% true for everybody. Does the citizenry trust their political leaders? Are there smaller factional groups that are resistant or trying to bring about some form of change? These specific examples could potentially come up in step 5, but we'll get to that in a minute. Is this society trusting of each other? Are they trusting of newcomers? How do they conduct themselves in business? Are they honorable? Do they fulfill their promises? Do they cheat and steal? Or try to weasel out of their obligations? Next thing to think about is how magical is this world that you're building? And magic goes beyond just casting spells. It can be the life force of the planet. It can be the creatures that inhabit the planet. It could be built into the society as a whole. Maybe they respect it, maybe they worship it, maybe they fear it. If there's a lot of magic on your world, how would it affect food? How would it affect the buildings? How would it have affected technology? This can also blend into the next topic of religion. What do the people on this planet worship? Do they revere a single god? Do they have an entire pantheon? Maybe they worship all of the standard Starfinder gods. Maybe they don't. Maybe they have their own gods. If you're going to create your own pantheon for your game, good luck to you. That's also a lot of work on the GM. It would also be unusual that a society would have a single religion. It does happen, but if that's the case, how would that have affected society? How would that affect the psyche of the people living in your world? Does their god or gods intervene in their lives with daily miracles or even just special events? Is it highly organized? Is it a loose collection of groups who try to spread their good message? How do they treat those who don't believe the same thing as them? What kind of rituals do they perform or do they believe in? Is there any form of atonement or gift giving that is necessary or part of the religion? When you're dealing with these concepts, everything that I've talked about in this video, start broad, start very high level, and then slowly bring it in and make it more refined. And lastly, let's talk about technology within the civilization. If it's a high magic civilization, do they also have high technology? Do they go the opposite direction? If there's low magic in the society, it would stand to reason that maybe their technology would be a little bit more advanced. Technology is also very diverse, so what would the technology look like for your society? And technology doesn't just mean transportation vehicles and weapons. It also has significant impact on communication. The idea of ever-advancing technology means that it is making our lives more comfortable, more automated, so that we don't have to do as much as people. Is this having a positive or negative effect within your society? If there are multiple species within this planet that make up a diverse society, do they all speak a common language? If not, is there a universal translator, a common technological item that allows people to communicate even though they don't speak the same language? Step 5 is when you start filling in some of the nitty-gritty details. If you're sending your players to this new planet that you've just created, what adventure hook are you giving them to get them there? If they've crash landed or just discovered this planet, what is going to draw them to the surface and potentially keep them there? I would suggest having written down several names for NPCs that they can encounter, and have them affiliated with major groups within this society. Various guilds, construction guilds, adventure guilds, mining guilds. And maybe they're not guilds, maybe they're massive corporations that have big-time CEOs. Maybe it's a member of a criminal organization. If you're running a true sandbox experience for your players, they will tell you what they want to do. And then you can start filling in more blanks for them as you go. Now, with all of these steps, don't feel that you need to do them all at once. If you start with the broad strokes and get your ideas, as you play, you can start to narrow your focus. If you're spending the dedicated time to do this all from scratch, then absolutely take the time to devote to the craft or to building this world, this project of yours. But if you're doing this on the fly, it doesn't all need to be sorted right away. Figure out your broad strokes and fill in the gaps as needed, and your players will think that you had this planned all along. Now that you have a solid world for your players to run around in, you need to watch this next video on your screen where I discuss my process for preparing for your next Starfinder game session. Thank you to all of my patron supporters and for voting on this month's video around world building. My name's Nathaniel. Thanks for stopping by, everyone.